48 hours ago, I signed a document making me the family villain but the hero of my own life. While sipping espresso in Paris, my phone vibrated with 88 missed calls and 124 texts. My father claims I killed my brother, but I didn't. I simply sold my $499,000 house before they could steal it for free. They thought I was a sheep, but sheep have fangs when cornered. My name is Harmony Aldridge. I state this not as a declaration of ego, but as a grounding technique. When you spend 34 years being treated as a secondary character in your own autobiography, you sometimes have to remind yourself that you are, in fact, the protagonist. By day, I am the creative director at Vanguard Horizon Solutions, a firm where I command a six-figure salary and the respect of 40 subordinates. I navigate high-stakes branding crises, manage million-dollar budgets, and turn corporate disasters into marketing triumphs. In the glass-walled conference rooms of downtown Austin, I am formidable. I am seen. I am heard. But the moment I drive my Audi onto the cracked pavement of my parents' driveway, I shrink. The armor of my professional success dissolves, leaving behind the exposed skin of a daughter who was never quite enough, yet always asked for too much. My sanctuary from this dichotomy is my home. It is a mid-century modern gem tucked away in the quieter hills on the outskirts of Austin, Texas. I bought it as a fixer-upper 3 years ago, but it represents 10 years of skipped vacations, 80-hour work weeks, and a relentless, grinding discipline. The house is currently valued at $499,000, but to me, the appraisal number is irrelevant. The value lies in its silence. It lies in the floor-to-ceiling windows that look out over the live oaks, the warm teak wood paneling I restored with my own hands, and the specifically curated emptiness of the space. Every piece of furniture in my living room was chosen by me, paid for by me, and sits exactly where I want it. There are no sticky fingerprints on the glass coffee table. There are no piles of unpaid bills hidden under sofa cushions. It is the architectural manifestation of control. It is the one place on earth where I am not an ATM, a safety net, or a disappointment. It is the only place where I am simply harmony. However, in the twisted ecosystem of the Aldridge family, my stability is not viewed as an achievement. It is viewed as a resource that is unfairly hoarded while others starve. The others, of course, refers to my brother, Caleb. Caleb is 36 years old, 2 years my senior, and he has turned failure into a competitive sport. If there were an Olympic event for bad decision-making, Caleb would be standing on the podium, weeping about how the judges were biased against him while my mother polished his gold medal. He is a man who has never owned a mistake in his life because he has never been allowed to hold one long enough to feel its weight. My parents, Frank and Eleanor, have spent nearly 4 decades acting as human shields, intercepting every consequence the universe has tried to send his way. He is currently married to Brittany, a woman whose ambition is inversely proportional to her spending habits. Together, they have 6-year-old twin boys, Noah and Liam. The twins are the only innocent parties in this generational tragedy. They are sweet, quiet children who have learned early on that the best way to survive in a chaotic household is to become invisible. They are often left in front of screens for 10 hours a day while Caleb plays video games and Brittany scrolls through social media, dreaming of a lifestyle she refuses to work for. The dynamic in our family was established long ago, carved into stone before I even finished elementary school. Caleb is the fragile bird with the broken wing who must be protected at all costs. I am the sturdy branch that exists solely to support the nest. They do not call it exploitation, they call it family. They wrap their demands in the soft language of love and duty, making it nearly impossible to refuse without feeling like a monster. I remember the first time the dynamic became financial. I was 23, fresh out of college, working 2 jobs to save for a deposit on an apartment. Caleb had just totaled his car while driving with a suspended license. My father sat me down at the kitchen table, his face grave, his hands clasping mine. He told me that Caleb needed $3,000 to pay the fines and avoid jail time. "We just don't have the liquidity right now." "Harmony," my father had said, his eyes pleading. "He's your brother. He made a mistake. You have savings. You're the responsible one." I paid it. I drained my account, pushed my move-out date back by 6 months, and saved Caleb. He never thanked me. In fact, at the next Thanksgiving, he made a joke about my cheap car, laughing while he drove a rental my parents had paid for. That was the beginning, over the last decade. The requests have been relentless, yet unpredictable, like landmines scattered across the landscape of my life. There was the time Caleb and Brittany were evicted from their second apartment because Caleb forgot that rent was due on the 1st of the month. That cost me $2,500 to secure them a new place. Then there was the investment opportunity in a crypto mining scheme that turned out to be a scam. That was another $4,000, framed as a loan that has never seen a single cent of repayment. Whenever I tried to say no, my mother would unleash the guilt. She is a virtuoso of emotional manipulation. "You have so much harmony," she would say, looking around my clean, quiet house with a mixture of envy and judgment. "Look at all this space, just for you. Meanwhile, your brother is struggling to put food on the table for those babies. How can you sleep at night knowing your nephews are suffering?" The argument was always the same. Because I am single and childless. My needs are considered optional. My money is considered extra. My house is considered excessive in their minds. My success is not the result of sacrifice. It is a stroke of luck that I am morally obligated to share with the unlucky one. They do not see the nights I stayed up until 3 a.m. perfecting a pitch deck. They do not see the years I drove a 10-year-old sedan so I could pay down my student loans. They only see the result, and they feel entitled to a dividend. I had almost resigned myself to this life sentence of servitude. I had built walls around my heart, thick enough to withstand the requests, but porous enough to let the guilt seep through. I thought I had managed to reach a détente, a sort of Cold War where I paid a protection tax to keep them at arm's length. Then came the email from corporate. It arrived on a Tuesday morning, flagged with high importance. Vanguard Horizon Solutions had just acquired a major luxury client based in Europe, and they needed a senior creative lead to oversee the rebranding integration. The assignment was in Paris. The duration was 6 months. When I read the offer letter, I felt a physical sensation I had not experienced in years. It was a lightness in my chest, a sudden expansion of my lungs, as if I were finally breathing oxygen instead of recycled air. Paris, 6 months of cobblestone streets, of professional challenges that would define my career, of distance, 3,000 miles of glorious, saltwater distance between me and the Aldridge family drama. I accepted the offer within 15 minutes. I spent the rest of that afternoon in a daze of euphoria. I walked out of my office and stood on the sidewalk, looking up at the Texas sky, imagining it was the gray-blue hue of a Parisian twilight. For the first time, I wasn't Harmony the daughter, or Harmony the sister, or Harmony the ATM. I was Harmony the traveler, Harmony the executive, Harmony the free woman. But as the sun began to set, and I drove back toward the suburbs, the euphoria began to curdle into anxiety. The reality of my departure settled in the passenger seat beside me. Leaving meant leaving my house, my $499,000 sanctuary. A normal person would be worried about logistics. Who would water the plants? Who would collect the mail? Who would ensure the pipes didn't freeze if there was a freak winter storm? I was not worried about the pipes. I was worried about the vultures. I knew, with a terrifying certainty, that my empty house would be seen as a vacuum that nature and my family would abhor. To Frank, Eleanor, and Caleb, a 6-month vacancy would not look like a security risk. It would look like an opportunity. It would look like a waste of resources. I pulled into my driveway and turned off the engine, but I didn't get out of the car immediately. I sat there in the dark, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I looked at the clean lines of my home, the soft glow of the solar-powered path lights, the manicured timeline of my independence. I could feel the conversation coming before it even happened. I could hear my mother's voice in my head, reasoning that it made no sense for the house to sit empty when Caleb was between blessings, as she liked to call his periods of unemployment. I could see my father nodding in agreement, talking about stewardship and family duty. The joy of the Paris promotion was suddenly suffocated by a heavy, familiar dread. I wasn't just leaving for a job. I was leaving my fortress unguarded. I walked inside and locked the door behind me, engaging the deadbolt with a loud mechanical clank. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door. I was 34 years old. I was a successful executive. I owned this property, and yet I felt like a teenager trying to hide a diary, terrified that the people who were supposed to love me were plotting to strip mine my life the moment my back was turned. I poured myself a glass of wine and stood in the center of my living room, the silence pressing against my ears. This was my space. I had paid for every square inch of it with my sanity. "I won't let them," I whispered to the empty room. But even as I said it, a cold knot formed in my stomach. I knew my family. I knew their tenacity when it came to things they believed they were owed. They viewed boundaries as suggestions and no as the start of a negotiation. The battle lines were being drawn. Even if they didn't know it yet, I was going to Paris. But before I could go, I had to survive the goodbye. And more importantly, I had to figure out how to protect the one thing that was truly mine from the people who believed that everything I had was theirs for the taking. The air at my parents' house on Labor Day always smelled the same. It was a thick, cloying mixture of charcoal fluid, oversweetened barbecue sauce, and unspoken resentment. The heat in Texas in early September is not a weather event. It is a physical oppression. It presses down on your shoulders and wraps around your throat, much like the expectations of the Aldridge family. I sat on the white plastic patio chair that had been in their backyard for 15 years. It was stained with pollen and wobbled on the uneven concrete, a fitting throne for the family scapegoat. Across from me, my brother Caleb was nursing his third beer, although it was only 1 in the afternoon. He sat with his legs sprawled wide, claiming as much space as possible, while his wife, Brittany, scrolled through her phone with a look of permanent boredom etched onto her face. My father, Frank, was manning the grill. He flipped burgers with an aggression that suggested the meat had personally offended him. My mother, Eleanor, fluttered between us, topping off iced teas and rearranging napkins. Her movements jerky and nervous. She possessed a radar for tension that was more sensitive than any military equipment. And today, the radar was screaming. I had waited until we were all seated with plates of potato salad and corn on the cob before I dropped the news. I wanted their mouths to be full. I wanted them to be distracted by the mechanics of eating so they could not immediately interrupt me. "I have some news," I said, keeping my voice level, the way I would when presenting a quarterly loss to a board of directors. "Vanguard is sending me to Paris. I'm leading the integration for the new luxury account. I leave in 2 weeks, and I'll be gone for 6 months." I watched them closely. In a normal family, this announcement would be met with gasps of delight. Congratulations. Perhaps a toast. There would be questions about the food, the art, the apartment I would be renting near the Seine. But the Aldridges are not a normal family. The reaction was instantaneous and chillingly synchronized. My father froze with a burger halfway to his mouth. Caleb blinked, processing the information through a haze of light beer. Brittany actually looked up from her phone, her eyes narrowing as she calculated the net worth of my sentence, but it was my mother who terrified me the most. She did not smile. She did not clap. Instead, she shot a sharp, loaded glance at my father. It was a look I had seen 1,000 times before. It was the look of a general assessing a sudden shift in the battlefield terrain. It was a look of calculation. "Paris," my mother said, the word tasting strange in her mouth. She set her fork down. "That is a long way away. Harmony, 6 months is a very long time to be away from your family. It's a huge opportunity for my career." "Mom," I replied, slicing into my corn. "It comes with a significant raise and a title bump." Well, of course. The money is good for you, my father grunted, finally taking a bite of his burger. You always land on your feet. Must be nice. There it was. The dismissal. The subtle implication that my hard work was merely a cosmic accident. My mother leaned forward, her elbows resting on the plastic tablecloth. Her face softened into a mask of concern that didn't quite reach her eyes. The transition was seamless, a masterclass in emotional pivoting. "And what about the house?" she asked. I stiffened. "What do you mean?" "Your house, honey," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "It's a big place to leave empty for half a year. Anything could happen. Pipes burst, burglars watch for empty driveways, squatters break in. It's terribly unsafe to leave an asset like that unattended." I took a sip of my iced tea to buy myself 3 seconds of thinking time. "I've thought about that," I said. "I'm hiring a property management firm. They'll do weekly checks, handle the landscaping, and ensure the security system is monitored. It's all arranged." The air at the table shifted. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees despite the Texas sun. My mention of a third-party management firm had thrown a wrench into the gears of a machine they had started building the moment I said the word Paris. My father set his burger down with a heavy thud. "A management firm. You're going to pay strangers to walk through your house. That's ridiculous. Harmony. That's throwing money down the drain." "It's a business expense. Dad, I can write it off." "It's wasteful," my mother interjected, her voice gaining a frantic edge. "Why would you pay strangers when you have family right here who can help you? It just so happens that well. It's funny how God works, isn't it?" She looked at Caleb. Caleb looked at his beer bottle, peeling the label with his thumbnail. He didn't meet my eyes. "What is funny about how God works, Mom?" I asked, my voice hardening. "Caleb and Brittany are in a bit of a transition," she said, choosing her words with the care of a bomb disposal technician. "Their landlord is being totally unreasonable. He wants to sell the building, and he's giving them 30 days to vacate. Can you believe the cruelty of people creating a crisis for a family with 2 little boys?" I looked at Caleb. "You're getting evicted again." "It's not an eviction," Caleb snapped, his face flushing red. "The guy is selling the place." "It's a lease termination. There's a difference." "The point is," my mother continued, raising her voice to talk over the technicalities, "they need a place for a few months while they look for the perfect forever home, and you have a beautiful, empty house that needs looking after. It is the perfect solution. They can stay there rent-free, of course, since they're doing you a favor by providing security. You save money on the management company, and they get a roof over their heads. It is a win-win." She sat back, beaming, as if she had just solved the Middle East peace crisis. My stomach churned. The audacity was breathtaking. They didn't want to help me. They wanted to upgrade Caleb's lifestyle on my dime. They wanted to move my chain-smoking brother and his chaotic household into my pristine sanctuary. I thought of my white rugs. I thought of my teak wood paneling. I thought of Caleb's history of leaving holes in drywall and stains on carpets. "No," I said. The word hung in the humid air like a gunshot. My mother's smile faltered. "What do you mean?" "No. I mean no. Mom, I am not comfortable with anyone living in my house while I'm gone. It's not a rental property. It's my home. I have very specific insurance requirements, and I've already signed a contract with the management company." The lie about the signed contract came easily. It was a defensive reflex. "You can cancel a contract," my father said, his voice deepening into the growl he used when I was a teenager and missed curfew. "This is your brother we are talking about. This is your flesh and blood." "I understand that, Dad, but mixing family and business is never a good idea. We've tried this before. Remember when I loaned Caleb my car, and he returned it with a cracked bumper and no gas? I love you guys, but I value my property too much to risk it." "Risk it?" Brittany spoke up for the first time, her voice shrill. "Are you calling us risky? We are not animals. Harmony. We are family. God, you are so stuck up." "Brittany, be quiet," Caleb muttered. though he looked pleased that someone was defending him. My father leaned across the table, his face turning a shade of purple that matched the eggplant on the grill. "You are being incredibly selfish. Harmony, do you know that you are sitting there with your fancy job and your trip to France and your $500,000 house, and you can't even offer a helping hand to your brother who is down on his luck? Where did we go wrong with you? We raised you to care about people, not things." The accusation stung, as it was designed to. They knew exactly where to insert the knife to hit the old wounds of inadequacy. "I do care about people," I said, my hands trembling slightly under the table. "I have helped Caleb financially more times than I can count, but this is my home. It is my sanctuary. I need to know it will be exactly as I left it when I return." "Oh, so we're dirty," my mother cried, playing her favorite card, the martyr. "You think we're dirty people who will ruin your precious museum? Those are your nephews you are talking about refusing shelter to. Noah and Liam, innocent children." Caleb looked up, sensing his cue. He put on his best beaten dog expression. "We're really in a tight spot. Harm. The apartment we're in now, it's got mold." I didn't want to say anything, but Liam has been coughing. The doctor says it's the air quality. We just need a clean place for a few months until I get that promotion at the warehouse. There was no promotion at the warehouse. Caleb had been up for a promotion at various jobs for 10 years. It never materialized. "We are sleeping in the living room right now, so the boys can have the bedroom," Caleb continued, his voice cracking theatrically. "I just want my kids to have a backyard to run in for a while." "Is that so much to ask? Just for 6 months while you aren't even using it?" The manipulation was suffocating. They were weaving a web where my no equaled child abuse. If I refused, I wasn't just protecting my property. I was forcing my nephews to breathe mold and sleep on floors. I looked over at the sliding glass door where Noah and Liam were pressing their faces against the glass. Watching the adults argue, they looked small and confused. My heart broke for them, but I knew, with a clarity that cut through the guilt, that letting Caleb in was not the answer. If I let them in, they would never leave. 6 months would turn into a year. A year would turn into squatters' rights. My house would be destroyed, and I would be the one paying for the renovations to fix it. "I can help you with the deposit on a new apartment," I offered, a compromise that tasted like ash in my mouth. "I can give you $2,000 towards a new place, but the house is off limits. That is my final decision." My father stood up so abruptly that his chair fell backward onto the concrete. "Keep your money," he spat. "We don't want your charity if it comes with strings attached. You treat your money like a weapon. Harmony, you think you're better than us because you have a bigger bank account. But let me tell you something. You're poor in spirit. You have a cold heart." "Frank, sit down," my mother hissed. But she was looking at me with eyes that were hard and shiny like marbles. "Harmony, I really think you should reconsider. Think about what you're doing to the family dynamic. Do you really want to go to Paris knowing you left your brother on the street? How will you enjoy your croissants and your wine with that on your conscience?" "I am not leaving him on the street," I said. Standing up, I felt dizzy. The gaslighting was so intense I could almost smell the fumes. They were twisting reality in real time, painting me as the villain for simply owning something and wanting to keep it. I offered money. I offered help. You are choosing to reject it because it's not the specific thing you want. "It's not about the money," Brittany yelled. "It's about family supporting family, but you wouldn't know anything about that, would you? You just care about your career." I grabbed my purse. I couldn't breathe. The air in the backyard felt toxic. "I'm leaving," I said. "I have a lot of packing to do." "If you walk away now," my father threatened, pointing a grease-stained finger at me, "don't expect us to be there to see you off at the airport. You are turning your back on this family." "I'm not turning my back," I said, my voice shaking. "I'm setting a boundary." "Boundary," my mother scoffed, spitting the word out like a curse. "That's just a therapy word for selfishness." I walked through the house, past the faded family photos in the hallway where Caleb was always the center of the frame, and I was on the periphery. I walked out the front door and got into my car. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped my keys twice before I could start the engine. As I backed out of the driveway, I saw them standing on the porch, a united front. My father, red-faced and angry. My mother, weeping into a tissue. Caleb, looking at his feet, letting the women fight his battles. And Brittany, glaring at me with a look of pure entitlement. They didn't look like a family. They looked like a pack of wolves that had just realized the prey had teeth. I drove home in silence, the radio off. I felt battered. I felt like I had gone 12 rounds in a boxing ring. But beneath the guilt and the exhaustion, there was a tiny, flickering flame of resolve. I had said no. I had held the line. But as I pulled into my own driveway and looked at the clean, sharp angles of my house, I knew it wasn't over. The desperation in their eyes was too real. They felt entitled to my home, not as a favor, but as a right. I had won the battle at the barbecue, but I had the sinking feeling that the war had just begun. They wouldn't stop at a no, not when the prize was a $499,000 lifestyle they felt they deserved. I walked inside my house and locked the door, engaging every lock I had, but for the first time, the locks didn't make me feel safe. They felt like a challenge. The 2 weeks following the Labor Day barbecue were characterized by a silence that was far more unnerving than the shouting match that had preceded it. In my line of work, silence does not mean the problem has gone away. It usually means the competition is regrouping, analyzing the market data, and preparing a hostile takeover. My family, it seemed, was operating with the same corporate ruthlessness. I had expected a bombardment of guilt-tripping texts or angry voicemails. I expected my father to show up at my office to cause a scene, or my mother to call my friends to weep about how I was abandoning them. Instead, I got radio silence. For 3 days, my phone was blissfully, terrifyingly quiet. Then, the small, seemingly innocuous inquiries began. It started with Brittany. She sent me a text message on a Tuesday afternoon while I was in a strategy meeting. It was casual, peppered with emojis, the digital equivalent of a smile that doesn't reach the eyes. Hey Harm, hope packing is going well. So random. But Caleb and I were looking at smart home stuff for our next place. Fingers crossed. What system do you use for your heating and cooling? Is it the Nest or the Ecobee? Also, who is your internet provider? Your connection is always so fast when we visit. I stared at the screen. On the surface, it was a harmless question. Brittany was obsessed with gadgets she couldn't afford, but the timing was surgical. Why would she care about my specific thermostat model right now? And why ask about the internet provider? You don't ask about an internet provider unless you are planning to use that internet, I replied vaguely. It's a local setup, hard to manage if you don't know the codes. Why? She didn't answer the why. She just sent back a thumbs-up emoji. 2 days later, the physical intrusions began. My mother came over on a Thursday evening. She claimed she wanted to help me pack my toiletries and make peace before I left. I was wary, but I let her in. I am still her daughter, and a part of me, the part that never quite grew up, still wanted to believe she was capable of unconditional love. I left her in the living room while I went upstairs to answer a conference call with the Paris team. The call ran long, stretching into 45 minutes of logistical back and forth about office space in the 11th arrondissement. When I finally hung up, I walked down the stairs in my socks, making no sound on the hardwood steps. I stopped halfway down. My mother was standing in the center of my living room. She was not packing toiletries. She was holding a yellow retractable tape measure. She had the metal tab hooked onto the frame of my floor-to-ceiling sliding glass doors, and she was stretching the tape across the width of the glass, squinting at the numbers. I watched her for a full minute. She wrote something down in a small notebook she had pulled from her purse. Then she moved to the side window, the one that overlooks the magnolia tree, and repeated the process. Measure, retract, write. Mom, I said, my voice sharp. She jumped, the tape measure snapping back into its plastic casing with a loud thwack. She spun around, her hand clutching her chest. Oh, Harmony. You scared the life out of me, she gasped. shoving the notebook into her bag. "What are you doing?" I asked, descending the rest of the stairs. "Why are you measuring my windows?" Her eyes darted around the room, searching for a plausible lie. My mother is a good liar, but she requires preparation time. Caught off guard. She fumbled. "I was just checking the dimensions," she stammered. "I saw these beautiful velvet drapes at the outlet mall yesterday. A deep burgundy. I thought they would look so much better than these sheer blinds you have. I wanted to see if they would fit, as a going-away present. I don't want burgundy drapes." "Mom," I said, crossing my arms. "I like the natural light, and I'm leaving in 10 days. Why would I need new drapes for an empty house?" "Well, for when you get back," she said, her voice rising an octave. "Or just to keep the sun out while you're gone, to protect the floors. You know how the Texas sun ruins hardwood." It was a pivot, but a clumsy one. You don't measure for custom drapes for a house you are visiting. You measure for drapes for a house you are planning to nest in. She wasn't measuring for me. She was measuring because Brittany probably hated my sheer blinds and wanted something darker to block out the sun while she slept until noon. "Please don't buy anything," I said coldly. "I don't want anything changed." She looked hurt, or pretended to be, and put the tape measure away. But the seed of suspicion in my gut had sprouted into a thorny vine. They were not just hoping I would change my mind. They were planning as if the decision had already been made in their favor. The final straw, the moment that turned my suspicion into paranoia, involved my brother and a set of keys. It was 1 week before my flight. I was at the office, finalizing the handover of my local accounts. My phone rang. It was Caleb. "Hey, Harm." He sounded breathless, frantic. "Look, I'm really sorry to bother you at work, but I think I left my wallet at your place when we were there for the barbecue. I'm at the gas station and I have 0 cash. Can I swing by and grab it?" "I'm at work, Caleb," I said, typing an email with one hand. "I can't leave right now." I know, but didn't you say you keep a spare key under the ceramic planter on the back porch for the dog walker?" I froze. I did have a spare key hidden there. A relic from when I had a dog walker for a foster puppy 6 months ago. I hadn't used it since, but I had mentioned it once in passing. "I really need the wallet." "Harm," he pressed. "My license is in there. I can't drive without it." I sighed. It seemed plausible. Caleb losing a wallet was the most believable thing in the world. "Fine," I said. "It's under the blue pot, but put it back immediately and lock the deadbolt." "You're a lifesaver. Thanks, sis." He hung up. I went back to work, but a nagging feeling gnawed at the back of my neck. It was the instinct that had saved me from bad business deals and toxic relationships in the past. 2 hours later, I opened the app for my home security system. I had installed the system 3 months prior, after a string of break-ins in the neighborhood. It wasn't just a standard alarm. It included 3 high-definition, motion-activated cameras that were cleverly disguised as smoke detectors and floodlights. I had never mentioned these cameras to my family. To them, my house was just a house. To me, it was a fortress with eyes. I scrolled through the timeline. Motion detected, front porch. 10:14 a.m. I clicked on the video file. My heart hammered against my ribs as the footage loaded. I saw Caleb's beat-up sedan pull into my driveway. He got out, walked to the backyard, and reappeared a moment later with the spare key in his hand. But he didn't go inside immediately. He turned back to the driveway and waved. A second car pulled in, a white van with no logo. A man in gray coveralls stepped out. He was carrying a heavy tool bag. I watched. My breath caught in my throat. As Caleb led the man to my front door, Caleb unlocked the door with my spare key, and the man knelt down. Examining the lock mechanism, he took out a tool, a tension wrench, or a pick. I couldn't be sure and inserted it into the keyhole. He wasn't breaking in. He was analyzing the cylinder. They stood there for 3 minutes. The man said something to Caleb, and Caleb nodded, pulling a wad of cash out of his pocket, the pocket of the pants he was wearing, where his wallet supposedly wasn't. Then they both went inside. They were inside for 12 minutes. When they came out, The man handed Caleb a small, shiny object, a key, a duplicate. Caleb shook the man's hand. The man left. Caleb locked the door, returned the original spare key to the planter, and drove away. I sat in my ergonomic office chair, the air conditioning blasting, yet I was sweating. I felt violated. This wasn't just a family overstepping boundaries. This was premeditated infiltration. Caleb hadn't lost his wallet. He had staged an emergency to get access to my key so he could make a copy that he would keep, a copy that would grant him unrestricted access to my home the moment my plane took off. They weren't asking for permission anymore. They were seizing control. I closed my laptop and stared out the window at the Austin skyline. The betrayal tasted metallic, like blood in my mouth. They were so confident. They were so sure that I was the passive, dutiful daughter who would never check, never suspect, and ultimately, never fight back. I left work early. I drove home, my mind racing. I needed to confirm the scope of their delusion. I needed to know exactly how far they had gone in their minds. I arrived at my parents' house just before dinner. I didn't call first. I walked in and found my mother in the kitchen, chopping vegetables. She looked surprised to see me, her eyes darting to my face, scanning for suspicion. "Harmony, what a nice surprise," she said, wiping her hands on a towel. "Stay for dinner." "I can't," I said, leaning against the counter. I kept my posture relaxed, my voice casual. I needed to play this perfectly. "I just stopped by to drop off some mail that came for Dad. And to tell you, I've been thinking." "Thinking about what?" She paused, the knife hovering over a carrot. "About the house," I said. "You were right. Mom, it's a huge liability to leave it empty for 6 months. The insurance is a nightmare, and the property taxes are skyrocketing." Her eyes lit up. She set the knife down. "Exactly, I told you. It makes no sense to leave it." "Right," I continued. "So, I contacted a realtor this afternoon. I'm thinking of selling it before I leave. The market is hot right now. I could get a cash offer in 48 hours and just be done with it. No stress, no maintenance." The reaction was visceral. My mother dropped the dish towel. Her face went pale, drained of all color within seconds. It was genuine panic. "What?" she whispered. "You can't do that." "Why not?" I shrugged. "It's just a house. I can buy a new one when I get back, or maybe stay in Paris if I like it. Selling seems like the smartest financial move." "No," she screamed. "It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command." She rushed around the island and grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into my skin. "You cannot sell that house. Harmony, it is out of the question." "Mom, you're hurting me," I said, pulling my arm away. "Why do you care? It's my asset." "It's not just your asset," she shouted, her mask of maternal concern completely shattering to reveal the desperate entitlement underneath. "It's the family cradle. It's where we are supposed to have Christmas. Where the boys are going to grow up." The silence that followed was deafening. She froze, realizing what she had just said. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Where the boys are going to grow up. Not visit, not stay for a few months. Grow up." The confirmation hit me like a physical blow. They had already moved in their minds. My deed was just a formality. My mortgage payments were just a donation. The house was theirs. They had mentally redecorated the rooms, enrolled the twins in the local school, and planned their next decade within my walls. I was just the placeholder who paid the bills until I was convenient enough to be removed. "The boys have a home, Mom," I said quietly, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. "With their parents, in their apartment." "You know they are losing that apartment," she cried, tears starting to flow. "How can you be so cruel, threatening to sell the roof over your nephews' heads? You are bluffing. You wouldn't do it. You love this family too much." She was banking on my guilt. She was betting the house my house on the assumption that I was too weak to sever the tie. "I have to go," I said. "If you list that house," she hissed, her tone dropping to a venomous whisper, "you are dead to us. Do you hear me? You will have no one." I walked out, I didn't look back. As I sat in my car, shaking, I realized the scale of the war I was in. This wasn't about a temporary favor. This was a hostile acquisition. They had the keys, they had the intent, and they had the absolute moral certainty that they were in the right. I pulled out my phone and looked at the notification from the security camera. The image of Caleb handing the locksmith cash was burned into my retina. They thought I was bluffing about selling. They thought they had outsmarted me with a copied key and a guilt trip. They were wrong. I wasn't going to sell the house to a stranger. That would be too simple. I was going to do something much more permanent. I was going to ensure that when they put that stolen key into the lock, the door wouldn't just refuse to open. It would slam shut on their entire delusional reality. I dialed the number for the legal department at Titanium Holdings. It was after hours. But I knew the VP. "Hello?" a voice answered. "It's Harmony Aldridge," I said. "I'm ready to move forward with the expedited sale. But I have a special condition regarding the handover date, and I need a locksmith." The final disillusionment did not happen with a bang. It did not happen with a scream, or a thrown vase, or a dramatic confrontation in the rain. It happened on a Tuesday evening, in the stale, recycled air of my parents' hallway, accompanied by the mundane sound of a microwave beeping in the distance. I had driven over to their house unannounced. My official reason, the one I had rehearsed in the car, was that I wanted to drop off a box of old photo albums I had found while clearing out my attic. I told myself I was doing it for safekeeping. In reality, a pathetic, dying part of me was seeking one last hit of validation. I wanted to see them one more time before I left for Paris. I wanted to believe that the measuring tape incident and the copied key were just aberrations, moments of weakness born of desperation, not evidence of a systematic conspiracy. I was wrong. I parked my car down the street, not wanting to block their driveway in case Caleb was there. The evening air was thick with humidity. As I walked up the path to the front porch, I noticed the front door was slightly ajar. The screen door was closed, but the main wooden door was open to let in the breeze. My parents have never been big on security, mostly because they have nothing worth stealing. I raised my hand to knock, but I stopped. Voices drifted out from the kitchen at the back of the house. They were loud, animated, and laced with a jovial energy that I had not heard in years. Usually, when the family gathered, the air was heavy with complaints about money, health, or the unfairness of the world. Tonight, they sounded like people who had just won the lottery. I lowered my hand. I stepped into the foyer, my sneakers silent on the worn linoleum. I knew I should announce myself. I knew that eavesdropping was a violation of privacy. But the survival instinct that had been screaming at me for weeks took over. I needed to know what they said when they thought the bank was closed. I crept down the hallway, hugging the wall where the shadows were deepest. The kitchen light spilled out into the corridor, casting long, distorted shapes on the floor. "Pass the chips. Would you—" That was Caleb. He sounded relaxed. So, I talked to the guy with the truck. He said if we book for Sunday morning, he can give us a discount. Sunday is perfect because she flies out Saturday night. My breath hitched in my throat. Sunday morning, less than 12 hours after my flight was scheduled to depart. "Are you sure that gives us enough time?" Brittany's voice chimed in. She sounded giddy, almost manic. "I don't want to be hauling boxes if she decides to come back for a forgotten passport or something." "She won't come back," my mother said. Her voice was calm, authoritative, the voice of the ringleader. "Harmony is efficient. She never forgets anything. Once she gets on that plane, she is gone. We will have the keys, and we can move in immediately. I already told the neighbors that you are house-sitting to keep the insurance valid. They won't ask questions." I stood frozen. The sheer calculated logistics of it made me nauseous. They weren't just reacting to a housing crisis. They had a timeline. "I cannot wait to get out of that dump we are in," Brittany said. I heard the sound of a chair scraping against the floor. "And listen, Frank, I was thinking about the layout. You know that office Harmony has, the one with the built-in bookshelves and the north-facing window?" "The library?" my father asked. "Yeah, whatever she calls it. It has the best lighting in the house. I want to turn that into my studio. I can set up my ring light there and do my inventory unboxing videos. The background will look so rich. It will really elevate my brand. My stomach turned over. My office, the room where I had built my career, the room where I had spent countless nights working until my eyes burned, surrounded by my reference books and design awards. Brittany wanted to gut it and turn it into a backdrop for selling cheap, drop-shipped leggings and questionable diet supplements on social media. She didn't see a workspace. She saw a prop. "That seems fine," my father grunted. "She won't be using it. It is a waste of space otherwise." "What about when she comes back?" Caleb asked. His voice held a trace of hesitation, not out of morality, but out of fear of confrontation. "I mean, 6 months goes fast. What do we do in March?" There was a pause. The silence stretched for 3 seconds, heavy and pregnant with intent. Then my mother laughed. It was a soft, dismissive sound. "Oh, honey, don't worry about that," she said soothingly. "You know your sister. She hates conflict. She is terrified of rocking the boat. Once you are settled in, once the boys are enrolled in the school district there, well, she isn't going to throw you out on the street. She will huff and puff, but she will accept it." "Exactly," my father added. "Possession is 9/10 of the law. By the time she gets back, you will have established residency. The mail will be in your name. The neighbors will know you. If she tries to evict you, she will look like a monster. And Harmony cares very much about what people think of her." I pressed my hand over my mouth to stifle a gasp. They had weaponized my own personality against me. They knew I valued peace. They knew I was a people pleaser. And they were banking on those traits to steal my home permanently. It wasn't a temporary stay. It was a hostile takeover disguised as a family emergency. They were counting on the fait accompli, the fact that once the deed was done, I would be too weak to undo it. "It is going to be so nice to finally have some space," Brittany sighed. "I can't believe she has lived in that big house all alone for 3 years. It is so selfish, really, hoarding all those bedrooms." "She has always been like that," my father said, and then he delivered the sentence that finally severed the last tether connecting me to this family. He spoke with a mouth full of food, his voice thick with entitlement. "The girl is rich. She has money coming out of her ears. When she gets back, if she really wants her privacy, she can go rent a luxury apartment downtown. She can afford it. She owes us this. We raised her. We put a roof over her head for 18 years. Now it is her turn to return the favor. It is the least she can do. She owes us." The words hung in the air, vibrating with a toxicity that made my eyes water. I stood there in the dark hallway, and I felt something inside me break. It wasn't a loud break. It was the quiet, structural failure of a bridge that had been carrying too much weight for too long, for 34 years. I had believed that if I was good enough, successful enough, and generous enough, I could buy their love. I thought that if I solved their problems, they would finally see me, but they didn't see me. To Frank and Eleanor Aldridge, I was not a person. I was an investment vehicle. I was a retirement plan. I was a resource to be harvested until the field was bare. They didn't love me. They loved what I could provide, and they believed, with a religious fervor, that my success was actually their property. My father truly believed that because he had fed and clothed me as a child, the legal minimum requirement for a parent, he was entitled to confiscate my adult assets. He didn't see my house as the fruit of my labor. He saw it as back pay. The heat in the hallway seemed to vanish, replaced by a cold, clinical clarity. The tears that had been threatening to fall evaporated. My heart rate slowed down. I didn't storm into the kitchen. I didn't flip the table or scream about the thousands of dollars I had already given them. I didn't present them with the receipts of my sacrifice, because you cannot argue with parasites. You can only remove them. If I walked in there now, they would lie. My mother would cry and say I misunderstood. My father would bluster and gaslight me. Brittany would play the victim. They would change their plans, hide their intentions, and find another way to bleed me dry later. No, I needed them to believe the plan was working. I needed them to feel safe. I needed them to walk into the trap with their eyes wide open and their arrogance blinding them to the consequences. I slowly backed away. 1 step, 2 steps. I was careful to keep my weight on the balls of my feet so the floorboards wouldn't creak. I retreated out of the hallway, back through the foyer, and out the front door. I closed the screen door gently, holding the handle so it wouldn't latch with a noise. I walked down the driveway, the gravel crunching softly under my shoes, sounding like the ticking of a clock. I got into my car and sat there for a moment. Gripping the steering wheel, I looked at the house. The warm yellow light from the kitchen window looked cozy, inviting. It was a lie. Inside that light was a rot that had been spreading for decades. I started the engine and drove away. I didn't speed. I obeyed every stop sign. I signaled every turn. I was perfectly calm. As I drove through the dark streets of Austin, I made a mental list. The emotional part of the conflict was over. I was no longer a hurt daughter. I was a CEO dealing with a corporate espionage case. I was done being the safety net. I was done being the selfish sister. If they wanted to play games with property law and financial assets, I would oblige them, but I would play by the actual rules, not the twisted family rules they had invented. I picked up my phone and dialed my lawyer's private number. It was late, past 8 in the evening, but I pay him enough to answer. "Harmony," he answered, sounding surprised. "Everything okay? You fly out in 3 days? I need to make an adjustment to the closing documents with Titanium Holdings," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, flat, metallic, devoid of inflection. "We're scheduled to close on Monday morning, 48 hours after you leave," he said. "That's already tight." "I know. Keep the closing date, but I want to add a clause to the seller's disclosure. I want to ensure the new owners are fully aware that the property will be vacant as of Saturday night, and that any persons found on the premises after that time are unauthorized trespassers. I want that explicitly documented." "Okay," he said slowly. "That's standard. But we can highlight it. Is there a problem?" "No problem," I said, watching the road stretch out before me. "Just tying up loose ends, and I need you to confirm that Titanium Holdings has their own security team. I don't want the local police handling the initial handover if there are complications. Titanium always uses private security for asset recovery. They are very efficient. Harmony, what is going on?" "Nothing," I said. "I'm just liquidating a bad investment. Go ahead and finalize the paperwork. I'll sign everything digitally tomorrow." I hung up. I arrived back at my house, my beautiful, quiet, empty house. I walked into my office. I stood in the center of the room, looking at the built-in bookshelves and the north-facing window. I imagined Brittany here, shoving my design awards into a box to make room for her cheap polyester leggings. I imagined her ring light glaring in the corner. I walked over to my desk and ran my hand along the smooth wood. "They aren't going to touch you," I whispered to the room. I sat down and opened my laptop. I had 3 days left, 3 days to pack the rest of my life, 3 days to act the part of the oblivious, trusting daughter, 3 days to let them think they had won. I opened my email and drafted a message to my parents. Subject final, goodbye, BBQ. "Hi, Mom and Dad. I'm so busy with packing I don't think I can come over again before I fly out, but I wanted to say I love you guys. I'm leaving the spare keys under the planter like Caleb asked, just in case of emergencies. Please just water the plants for me. I'll see you in 6 months. Love, Harmony." I hit send. It was the first time in my life I had deliberately lied to them. It felt heavy, but it also felt like armor. I was feeding the beast one last meal before I starved it to death. They wanted the house fine. They could have the experience of the house. They could walk in. They could unpack. They could pop the champagne. But they were about to learn a very expensive lesson in ownership. You cannot steal what has already been sold, and you cannot guilt-trip a corporation. Frank Aldridge thought I owed him, by next week. He would realize that the only thing I owed him was the reality check he had been avoiding for 30 years. I went to bed and slept soundly for the first time in months. The decision was made. The guilt was gone. All that was left was the execution. In the world of high-stakes corporate branding, there is a concept known as crisis containment. When a client is facing a catastrophic failure, a product recall, a scandal, a data breach, you do not waste time hoping for the best. You isolate the variable, you cut off the infected limb, and you restructure the asset to ensure survival. My family had become a toxic asset. My house, the $499,000 physical manifestation of my hard work, was the battlefield. And I knew that if I sold it to a nice young couple or a retiring teacher, I would simply be transferring my trauma onto innocent bystanders. Frank and Caleb would not respect a sold sign. They would harass the new owners. They would knock on the door at dinner time. They would probably try to sue them. I could not inflict the Aldrich sense of entitlement on a civilian. I needed a buyer who was immune to emotional manipulation. I needed a buyer who viewed tears, threats, and but-were-family speeches as irrelevant noise. I needed a shark. Enter Titanium Holdings. Titanium Holdings was not a family-friendly real estate agency. They were an institutional investment firm, a massive conglomerate that was aggressively acquiring single-family homes in the Austin suburbs to convert them into high-end corporate rentals for traveling executives. They were known in the industry for three things: deep pockets, lightning-fast closings, and absolute ruthlessness when it came to property management. They did not have landlords. They had asset managers. They did not have security guards. They had enforcement teams. I called Marcus, a real estate attorney I had worked with on a commercial lease years ago. He was the kind of lawyer who smiled with his teeth, but never with his eyes. I need to liquidate a residential asset, I told him over the phone, my voice devoid of sentiment. And I need it done off-market, entirely in cash, and with a specific condition regarding occupancy. Marcus didn't ask why. He simply set up the meeting. The meeting took place in a glass-walled conference room on the 35th floor of a downtown skyscraper, a world away from the sticky plastic tablecloth of my parents' patio. I sat across from a representative of Titanium Holdings, a man named Sterling, who looked like he had been 3D printed out of money and indifference. "We are familiar with the property," Sterling said, tapping a tablet. "Mid-century modern, good bones. The area is appreciating. We are interested. But why the rush, Ms. Aldridge? And why are you bypassing the open market? You could likely get 5 to 10% more if you listed it publicly and started a bidding war." "I am not interested in a bidding war," I replied, folding my hands on the mahogany table. "I am interested in speed and anonymity. I am moving to Paris for a long-term assignment. I need the liquidity now, and I need a clean break." I paused, then laid my cards on the table. Not all of them, but enough to play the game. "There is a complication," I said. "My family believes they have a claim to the property, not a legal claim. Mind you, my title is clean, but they are under the impression that they will be moving in the moment I leave. They have a copy of a key that was obtained without my consent." Sterling didn't blink. He didn't look shocked. To a company like Titanium, a disgruntled relative was just another line item in a risk assessment spreadsheet. "I see," he said. "So you are selling us a property with a potential hostile occupancy issue." "I am selling you the property at a discount," I corrected him. "I am willing to accept 5% below market value. In exchange, I require an all-cash closing within 48 hours, and I require a specific clause in the contract stating that the buyer, Titanium Holdings, assumes full responsibility for securing the property and removing any unauthorized persons found on the premises after the transfer of possession." Sterling looked at me for a long moment. He was calculating the margins. 5% on a $500,000 home was roughly $25,000. To a corporation, evicting a few squatters was a matter of paperwork and a phone call to their legal team. It was a headache worth less than $5,000. The math worked in their favor. "And when does possession transfer?" he asked. "My flight is Saturday night," I said. I want the official transfer of deed to be recorded on Tuesday morning. That gives you a 72-hour window where the house is technically in limbo. But legally, as of Tuesday at 9 in the morning, it is yours. I want your security team there at 9:05. We can do that, Sterling said, extending a hand. We have a dedicated asset protection unit. They are very efficient. They usually handle commercial disputes, but they will handle this. I shook his hand. His grip was dry and firm. It felt like shaking hands with a guillotine sharp, precise, and final. One more thing, I added. Absolute secrecy, no for sale signs in the yard, no inspectors coming by while I'm still there, no public listing until the deed is recorded. My family cannot know the house is sold until they are staring at your eviction notice. Ms. Aldridge, Sterling said with a thin smile, Titanium Holdings prefers privacy as well. We do not advertise our acquisitions until we are ready to monetize them. You will not hear a peep from us. The deal was signed. I walked out of that skyscraper feeling 5 pounds lighter. I had just sold my dream home for less than it was worth, but the difference in price was the premium I was paying for justice. I wasn't just selling a house. I was purchasing a mercenary army to fight a battle I was too emotionally exhausted to fight myself. The next 3 days were a blur of calculated deception. If I was going to pull this off, the house had to look like I was just going away for a trip, not moving out forever. If I stripped the house bare, Caleb and Brittany would panic. They would know something was wrong. They might try to move in early. Or worse, confront me before I could leave. I had to set the stage. I had to create a set design for the drama that would unfold after my departure. I hired a private moving company that specialized in high-profile relocations. They came at 2 in the morning, parking their unmarked truck in my garage with the door closed so the neighbors and my mother's spies would see nothing. We worked in silence. I packed the things that actually mattered to me, my grandmother's jewelry, my personal journals, the hard drives with my design portfolio, my expensive winter coats, and the small, sentimental trinkets I had collected from my travels. These were the items that carried my soul. I sent 15 boxes to a secure, climate-controlled storage facility on the other side of Austin. I paid for a year in advance and set the account to auto-renew. The access code was known only to me. But I left the props. I left the oversized beige sectional sofa in the living room. It was expensive, but it was replaceable. I left the heavy oak dining table. I left the guest bed and the master bed frame. I even left a few cheap prints on the walls and some kitchen appliances on the counter. To the untrained eye specifically, to the greedy eyes of my brother and his wife, the house looked fully furnished. It looked like a turnkey paradise waiting for them to crash into. They would see the sofa and imagine themselves watching football on it. They would see the dining table and imagine hosting Thanksgiving. They would not notice that the drawers were empty, that the personal photos were gone, or that the closet contained only wire hangers. The furniture was the cheese in the mousetrap. On Friday, 24 hours before my flight, I went to the bank. I withdrew $5,000 in cash. I put it in an envelope along with a letter I had written to Caleb. I sealed it and placed it in my carry-on bag. This was not a severance package. It was a contingency fund for my own conscience. When the hammer came down, I wanted to know that I had left him a lifeline, even if he didn't deserve it. I would email him the location of a digital transfer later. Once I was safe in Paris, I would not hand it to him now. He would just spend it on a celebration dinner for a house he didn't own. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. Did you leave the thermostat instructions? Brittany gets cold easily. I stared at the screen. The banality of evil is often discussed, but the banality of entitlement is just as breathtaking. She was asking for technical support for a home invasion. I typed back, "Everything is in the drawer by the fridge." Don't worry, I wasn't lying. The manuals were there. What I didn't tell her was that by the time Brittany tried to adjust the temperature, the smart thermostat would be remotely locked by Titanium Holdings' central server, set to a permanent, energy-saving 68 degrees. I walked through the house one last time on Saturday morning. The echo of my footsteps on the hardwood floors sounded different now. It didn't sound lonely. It sounded clean. I went into the library, the room Brittany planned to turn into her live stream studio. I looked at the built-in shelves where my books used to be. I had left a few paperback thrillers and generic magazines to fill the space. "You're not getting this room," I whispered. I felt a strange sense of detachment. This was no longer my home. It was a tactical asset that had been successfully leveraged. The sentimental attachment had been severed the moment my father told me I owed them my success. At 2 p.m, the car service arrived to take me to the airport. I had specifically requested a black sedan with tinted windows. As I locked the front door, I paused. I looked at the keypad. I knew Caleb had a physical key, the one he had copied. He wouldn't need the code, but I punched in a temporary code anyway, one that I would delete the moment the plane wheels touched the tarmac in France. I dragged my 2 suitcases down the driveway. The driver took them from me and loaded them into the trunk. Just as I was about to get in the car, a vehicle turned the corner. It was my parents' minivan. Of course, they couldn't resist. They wanted to see me off, to ensure the obstacle was truly removing herself from the equation. They pulled up to the curb. My mother rolled down the window. She was beaming. It was the happiest I had seen her in years. "You're off," she chirped. "Have a safe flight. Honey, don't worry about anything here. We will take good care of everything." "I know you will," I said, putting on my sunglasses to hide the lack of warmth in my eyes. "Did you leave the keys under the planter?" Caleb called out from the back seat. He didn't even get out of the car to hug me. He was just checking the inventory. "Yes," I said, "right where you expect them to be. Call us when you land," my father shouted. "And don't forget to send us pictures of the Eiffel Tower." They were waving. They looked like a normal, loving family saying goodbye to a daughter. But I knew the truth. They were not waving at me. They were waving at the house behind me. They were celebrating the departure of the guard dog, so they could raid the hen house. "Go," I told the driver, as the car pulled away. I watched them in the side mirror. They didn't wait long. Before my car had even reached the stop sign at the end of the block, I saw the minivan pull into my driveway. They weren't even waiting for my flight to depart. They were moving in now. I sat back in the leather seat and closed my eyes. A wave of nausea rolled over me, followed immediately by a surge of adrenaline. "Change of plans," I murmured to myself. I took out my phone and opened the Titanium Holdings app that Sterling had given me access to as part of the transition. It allowed me to view the property status until the deed transfer was finalized. I saw the status change from owner-occupied to vacant. Then, I saw the notification from my security system, which I had not yet deactivated. Front door opened, 2:14 p.m., they were inside. I felt a vibration in my pocket. It was the lawyer, Marcus. "We are all set for Tuesday," he said. "Funds are in escrow. The deed is prepared. But Harmony, are you sure about the timing if they move in today? They will have 3 days to get comfortable." "Let them," I said, watching the Texas landscape speed by the window. "Let them unpack. Let them stock the fridge. Let them think they have won. It will make the reality check on Tuesday that much more effective." "You're a cold woman, Harmony," Marcus said, but there was admiration in his voice. "I learned from the best," I replied. "I learned from my family." I hung up and turned off my phone. I wouldn't turn it on again until I was in Paris. By then, the spiderweb would be fully spun, and the flies would be hopelessly, intricately entangled. I was crossing an ocean, but I had left a shark in the swimming pool, and on Tuesday morning, feeding time would begin. The final performance took place on the concrete stage of my driveway, under the glaring spotlight of the Texas sun. It was a Saturday afternoon, and the air was thick with humidity and deceit. I stood by the trunk of the town car I had hired, watching my family pull up in their minivan. They spilled out of the vehicle with an energy that was too bright, too loud, and entirely fake. This was the moment they had been waiting for. For weeks, they had walked on eggshells, measuring their words and suppressing their greed, terrified that I would change my mind or discover their plot. Now, with my luggage loaded and the engine of the sedan idling softly, They could see the finish line. I was leaving. The obstacle was removing itself. My father, Frank, reached me first. He was wearing a polo shirt that was slightly too tight around the middle, and he had put on the expensive cologne he usually reserved for weddings and funerals. He enveloped me in a hug that felt like a bear trap. "Safe travels, kiddo," he said, slapping my back with a little too much force. "We are going to miss you. The place won't be the same without you." "It's only 6 months." "Dad," I replied, pulling away. I looked him in the eye. I wanted to remember this moment. I wanted to memorize the specific glint in his eyes. It was not sadness. It was the thrill of acquisition. He looked like a man who had just found a wallet on the sidewalk and was checking to see if anyone was watching before he pocketed it. 6 months is a long time. My mother, Eleanor, chimed in. She was dabbing at her dry eyes with a tissue. "A lot can happen in 6 months, but don't you worry about a thing. We will hold down the fort." "Speaking of the fort," I said, reaching into my purse. The atmosphere instantly sharpened. I could feel the collective intake of breath. Caleb, who had been leaning against the minivan with his hands in his pockets, straightened up. Brittany stopped scrolling on her phone and looked over. This was the transfer of power. I pulled out a small brass keyring. On it were 2 keys. These were the keys to the original deadbolt I had installed when I first bought the house 3 years ago. What they did not know, what they could not know, was that I had replaced the entire internal mechanism of the lock the previous week. I had installed a high-end smart lock system that looked exactly like a traditional key entry lock from the outside, but operated entirely on digital permissions. The physical keyhole was essentially a dummy cylinder unless I authorized it via the app. I held the keys out to my father. "Here," I said, "just in case there is an emergency with the sprinklers or a storm knocks out the power. These are the spares." My father took them. His fingers closed around the metal with a hunger that was almost obscene. He didn't just take them, he snatched them. "Good," he said, slipping them into his pocket and patting it, as if reassuring himself the prize was real. "We will keep them safe, just to check on the plants. Maybe flush the toilets once a week so the lines don't back up." "Right," I said, forcing a smile that felt like it was made of glass. "Just the plants. And please, Dad, I want to be clear. No sleeping over. I've paused the cable and the internet service to save money, so there is no Wi-Fi. It wouldn't be comfortable anyway. This was a test. I wanted to see how easily they would lie to my face one last time." Of course. My mother waved her hand dismissively. "We have our own beds. Harmony, we are just doing this to help you. We aren't looking for a vacation home." Behind her, I saw Brittany smirk. It was a quick, involuntary twitch of the lips, but I caught it. She knew I was lying about the internet. She had likely already checked the signal strength from the driveway. She probably thought I was just being petty, trying to discourage them with minor inconveniences that they planned to override the moment I was gone. "Caleb," I said, turning to my brother. He stepped forward, looking everywhere except at my face. He looked at the car, at the tree, at his shoes. He looked like a man who was trying to convince himself he wasn't a thief. "Take care of yourself." "Harm," he mumbled. "Paris. That's big." "It is," I said. "You take care of the family. Caleb, step up. Make it work." Yeah, I always do," he said, a flash of defensive irritation crossing his face. Then I looked down. Standing behind Caleb's legs were the twins, Noah and Liam. They were 6 years old, holding identical toy trucks, looking up at the adults with wide, confused eyes. They sensed the tension. Even if they didn't understand the mechanics of it, children are like Geiger counters for emotional radiation. They knew this ground was toxic. I crouched down. My expensive slacks brushed against the concrete, but I didn't care. I pulled them both into a hug. They smelled like grape juice and sunscreen. "Auntie Harmony has to go for a while," I whispered into their hair. "But I want you to be good boys. Okay, be brave." I felt a lump form in my throat, hot and painful. This was the only part of the plan that made my resolve waver. By locking the doors on their parents, I was effectively locking the doors on them too. I was casting them out. But then I remembered the conversation in the hallway, where the boys are going to grow up. If I let them stay, I would be enabling Caleb's incompetence for another decade. I would be teaching these boys that it is okay to take what isn't yours. I would be teaching them that success is something you steal from family, not something you build. The kindest thing I could do for Noah and Liam was to force their father to finally, grow up, even if it meant a hard lesson in the short term. "I love you both," I said, standing up quickly before the tears could spill over. I turned back to the car. "Okay, I have to go. I can't be late." Go, my mother ushered me, practically opening the car door herself. "Don't worry about us. We are fine. Bon voyage." I slid into the cool leather interior of the sedan. The driver closed the door, sealing me inside. The sound of the latch clicking shut was the sound of a guillotine blade dropping, severing the connection. As the car pulled away, I didn't look back. I couldn't bear to see them high-fiving in the driveway. I kept my eyes fixed on the road ahead, watching the familiar neighborhood blur into a stream of green and gray. 30 minutes later, I was at the airport. I moved through security like a ghost. I took off my shoes. I put my laptop in the bin, and I walked through the scanner. My body was performing the rituals of travel, but my mind was entirely focused on the digital interface of my phone. I sat at the gate, waiting for boarding group 1 to be called. I opened the smart home app. The status showed "System armed, mode away." I took a deep breath. This was it, the point of no return. I tapped into the settings. I navigated to the Guest Access tab. I created a new entry. User Caleb. Code 1988, his birth year. Duration 48 hours. Expires Tuesday, 9 a.m. I authorized the code by doing this. I was giving them exactly what they wanted. I was giving them the rope. This code would allow the keypad to work. It would allow the dummy keys I gave my father to turn the cylinder because the electronic deadbolt would disengage when the code was entered. It would grant them full, unrestricted access to my home for 2 days. Sunday and Monday. They would have 48 hours to move their boxes in, 48 hours to unpack, 48 hours to sleep in my guest beds, use my shower, and eat takeout in my kitchen. They would feel triumphant. They would feel secure. They would think the house was theirs. And then, on Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock, the code would expire, the system would hard lock, and Titanium Holdings would arrive 5 minutes later. It was a trap designed to maximize the psychological impact. If I locked them out now, they would just be angry. They would bang on the door and go back to their apartment. But if I let them move in, if I let them sever their ties with their old life and settle into mine, the eviction would be absolute. They would be homeless. Not because I made them homeless, but because they had arrogantly assumed ownership of a property that wasn't theirs. "Flight 209 to Paris is now boarding," the announcer's voice cut through the terminal. I stood up. I scanned my boarding pass. I walked down the jet bridge. When I settled into seat 4A, I declined the pre-departure champagne. I waited until we were in the air, until the seatbelt sign was turned off and the plane had leveled out at 30,000 feet. "Red wine," I told the flight attendant. "The heaviest one you have." She brought me a glass of Cabernet. I swirled the dark liquid, watching it coat the sides of the glass. I took a sip. It was tannic, bold, and tasted like iron. I looked out the window. The Texas landscape was gone, replaced by a blanket of clouds. I was untouchable. I was $499,000 richer and infinitely freer. A tear slid down my cheek. I let it fall. I didn't wipe it away. It wasn't a tear of regret. It was the physical release of 10 years of pressure. It was the mourning of the family I wished I had, and the acceptance of the family I actually had. I connected to the in-flight Wi-Fi. It cost me $20, a small price to pay for the satisfaction I was about to receive. My phone buzzed almost instantly. Motion-detected driveway, 4:15 p.m. I opened the camera feed. The video quality was crystal clear. My parents' minivan was backed up right to the garage door. But it wasn't just the minivan. Behind it was a rented trailer, a U-Haul trailer. They hadn't just brought a few bags. They were moving furniture. I watched as Caleb and my father lifted a mattress out of the trailer. It was a stained, sagging twin mattress, probably for the boys. They were dragging it across my pristine driveway. Brittany was directing them, pointing at the front door like a traffic cop. She was holding a large box labeled Kitchen in Sharpie. They were moving fast. They weren't watering plants. They were invading. Then, another notification popped up. This one was from Instagram. I switched apps. There it was. A new post from Brittany. The photo was taken in my living room. She was standing in front of my floor-to-ceiling windows, the ones my mother had measured for burgundy drapes. The late afternoon sun was bathing the room in a golden glow. Brittany was holding a glass of my wine. I recognized the bottle on the counter behind her. A vintage Pinot Noir I had been saving for a special occasion. She was smiling, a wide, predatory grin that showed all her teeth. She had tagged Caleb. The caption read, "So blessed, finally moved into our new forever home. God is good. Huge things coming for the Aldridge family. New beginnings. Home sweet home. Blessed moving day." I stared at the screen. Forever home. She hadn't even waited until my plane crossed the state line. She had declared ownership to the entire world before my seat was even warm. I took a screenshot. Then I opened my email and forwarded the screenshot to Sterling at Titanium Holdings and to my lawyer, Marcus. I added a simple subject line, evidence of unauthorized occupancy. Proceed as planned. I took another sip of wine. The liquid warmed my chest. "Enjoy the weekend," I whispered to the screen, looking at Brittany's smiling face. "It is the most expensive rental you will never pay for." I turned off the screen, put on my noise-canceling headphones, and closed my eyes. The hum of the engine was a lullaby. For the first time in my life, I wasn't worrying about what my family would do next. I knew exactly what they would do, and I knew exactly who would be waiting for them when the clock struck 9 on Tuesday. Paris in the morning is a symphony of muted grays and the smell of baking bread. A sensory experience that usually brings a sense of peace to the soul. However, for the first 48 hours of my exile, my soul was not in France. My soul was trapped in a digital purgatory, glued to the glowing screen of my iPad, watching a silent, horrifying, and utterly fascinating reality television show broadcasting live from Austin, Texas. I sat in a small cafe in the Marais district, nursing a single café au lait for 3 hours, wearing oversized sunglasses to hide the dark circles under my eyes. I was exhausted, not from jet lag, but from the sheer emotional toll of witnessing the desecration of my sanctuary. The feed from my security cameras was crisp, high definition, and merciless. It captured every frame of the Aldridge family's victory lap. They did not just move in, they colonized. Within 2 hours of my departure, the house I had spent 3 years curating with minimalist precision looked like a frat house after a particularly rowdy rush week. The guest access code I had given Caleb worked perfectly, just as I intended. It was the bait, and they swallowed it whole. I watched, feeling a strange mixture of nausea and dark amusement, as Caleb walked through my living room wearing nothing but his boxer shorts and one of my expensive Egyptian cotton bathrobes. He looked like a king surveying his new dominion. He wasn't just staying there, he was claiming the space. He sat on my beige sectional, the one I had left behind as a prop, and put his bare feet up on the coffee table. He didn't use a coaster. He popped open a beer and let the condensation drip onto the teak wood. "Make yourself at home, why don't you?" I muttered to the screen, my voice dripping with sarcasm that no one could hear. But the beer was just the appetizer. The main course of his disrespect came later that evening. I watched as he rummaged through my wine rack. I had cleared out most of the good bottles, sending them to storage, but I had deliberately left one behind. It was a bottle of Barolo, a vintage I had been saving for my 35th birthday. It was worth $300. Caleb pulled it out. He didn't check the label. He didn't look up the vintage. To him, it was just free booze. He uncorked it with a brute force that likely crumbled the cork into the wine, and then I actually gasped in the cafe he poured it into a plastic Paw Patrol cup that belonged to one of the twins. He drank a $300 Italian red out of a cartoon dog cup while watching football on my television. It was grotesque. It was the perfect visual metaphor for my brother's entire existence consuming quality he didn't earn. With zero appreciation for what it was, Brittany was no better. If Caleb was the slothful king, she was the frantic interior decorator from hell. I watched her on the feed as she paced around the living room, criticizing the walls. I couldn't hear the audio, but I could read her body language. She pointed at my abstract art pieces I had commissioned from local artists and made gagging motions. She took them down, stacking them carelessly in the hallway, and replaced them with cheap, mass-produced slogans she had brought in boxes. Within hours, my elegant foyer was adorned with a wooden sign that screamed, "Live Laugh," love in a cursive font that should be illegal. She began moving my furniture. She pushed my sofa against the wall, ruining the flow of the room, to create a large open space in the center for the twins to wrestle. She dragged my dining table to a different angle to catch the better light for her social media photos. It was a violation. It was like watching someone wear your skin. But the true height of their delusion arrived on Sunday afternoon. When my parents came to visit, I had expected Frank and Eleanor to be at least a little bit cautious. I thought they might whisper or look over their shoulders. Knowing that this arrangement was supposed to be temporary, I was wrong. They walked in with a swagger that suggested they had just conquered a small nation. My father walked around the perimeter of the living room, tapping the walls with his knuckles, nodding approvingly. He clapped Caleb on the shoulder, a gesture of pride I had never received in my entire career. I could almost hear the words he was saying. Finally, you have the castle you deserve, son. My mother and Brittany stood in the doorway of my master bedroom. I had locked the door. But of course, Caleb had picked it or forced it open. I saw them standing there, gesturing at the walls. Brittany held up paint swatches. They were discussing painting my room. My mother pointed to a shade of pale lavender. Brittany shook her head and pointed to a dark gray. They were debating the color palette of a room they did not own, in a house they did not pay for a future that did not exist. I zoomed in on the feed. My mother was smiling. It was a genuine, relaxed smile. She looked relieved. In her mind, the problem was solved. The rich daughter had gone away, leaving her resources behind for the needy son. The balance of the universe, according to the Aldridge Gospel, had been restored. They honestly believed that when I returned in 6 months, I would simply accept this. They thought I would see the new paint, the damaged floors, and the entrenched family, and I would just shrug and move into a hotel because I was too nice to make a scene. They were banking on my weakness. They had bet the farm on it. I closed the iPad cover. I couldn't watch anymore. The anger that had been simmering in my gut had cooled into something hard and heavy, like a stone. It wasn't rage anymore. It was pity. They were dancing on the deck of the Titanic, rearranging the deck chairs, completely unaware that the iceberg had already hit and the water was rising. Tuesday morning arrived with the gray, wet chill typical of Paris in autumn. I woke up at 7 in the morning, which was midnight in Austin. The 48-hour window was closing. I sat on the edge of my bed in the temporary apartment Vanguard had rented for me. My phone was in my hand. I was waiting for one specific notification. At 9:02 in the morning, Paris time, which was 2:02 in the morning in Austin, it arrived. It was a secure message from Marcus, my lawyer. Subject transaction, finalized. Harmony. The wire transfer has been confirmed. The funds have cleared and are now in your offshore holding account as requested. The deed recording was electronically filed at the county clerk's office as soon as they opened their digital queue. Title has officially transferred to Titanium Holdings, LLC. Net proceeds, $474,050. Congratulations. It is done. I stared at the number, $474,000. It wasn't just money, it was severance pay. It was the price of my freedom. I had sold my history to buy my future. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding since I was 16 years old. The house was gone. It was no longer my property. It was no longer my burden. The scratch on the floorboards. Not my problem. The wine stain on the rug. Not my problem. The 4 adults and 2 children currently sleeping inside. Definitely not my problem. They were trespassing on corporate property. I opened the smart home app one last time. The status still showed system armed. I navigated to the users tab. I saw Caleb, guest, listed there. I didn't delete the code. I didn't need to. The system was now owned by Titanium. Their IT team would be resetting the entire network remotely within the hour. Instead, I went to the account settings. Delete account. A warning popped up. Are you sure this will permanently remove your access to all cameras, locks, and history? This action cannot be undone. I pressed confirm. The screen went black for a second, then refreshed to the login page. I was blind. I could no longer see into the living room. I could no longer check the thermostat. I could no longer watch the grotesque reality show of my family playing house. The connection was severed. I felt a phantom pain, like a missing limb, but it was quickly replaced by a profound sense of hygiene. I was clean. I had one final task to perform. I opened my laptop. I had drafted an email 3 days ago, scheduled to send automatically at 8 in the morning, Austin time, exactly 1 hour before the Titanium security team was scheduled to arrive. I wanted them to be awake. I wanted them to be having their morning coffee, perhaps using my espresso machine, feeling settled and happy. I wanted the notification to hit them when they were at their most comfortable. I checked the draft. To Frank Aldridge, Eleanor Aldridge, Caleb Aldridge, BCC, Brittany Aldridge. Subject update regarding the house. Dear Mom, Dad, and Caleb, I hope you are doing well. By now, you have probably settled in comfortably. I noticed from the security logs before I disconnected them that you made yourselves quite at home. I am writing to inform you of a change in plans. As I mentioned before I left, maintaining a property of that size while living abroad is a financial and logistical liability I was not willing to carry. Therefore, I decided to sell the property. The closing was finalized this morning. The house has been sold to an investment firm called Titanium Holdings. I no longer own the home, the land, or anything inside it that I did not move to storage. The new owners are aware that the property was supposed to be vacant as of Saturday. They are coming to take possession of the asset immediately. I have no control over their policies or their actions. I strongly suggest you cooperate with them. I have left a digital transfer of $5,000 in Caleb's name at the Western Union on 5th Street to help with a deposit on a new rental. That is the extent of the assistance I can offer. Please do not try to call me. I have changed my number to a local French line and will not be checking my old voicemail. I hope you understand that this was a business decision. I wish you all the best. Harmony. I hovered my mouse over the Send Now button. I thought about the twins. I thought about Noah and Liam waking up to chaos. A pang of guilt shot through me, sharp and familiar. But then I remembered the painting. I remembered the wine. I remembered she owes us. If I didn't send this, they would stay there for 6 months. They would destroy the house. And when I came back, I would have to be the one to evict them. I would have to be the one to call the police on my own brother. It would be a messy, screaming, personal war. This way. The war was impersonal. It was corporate. It was undeniable. I clicked send. The message whooshed away into the ether. I sat back in the chair and closed my laptop. It was done. In Austin, it was the middle of the night. The email was sitting in their inboxes, a ticking time bomb waiting for the sun to rise. They were sleeping in my beds, dreaming their dreams of free rent and entitlement, completely unaware that the ground beneath them had already been sold. I imagined the scene that was coming, the silence of the house in the early morning, the coffee brewing, the chime of a phone notification, the confusion, the denial, and then the knock at the door. But I wouldn't see it, and I wouldn't hear it. I stood up, put on my coat, and walked out of the apartment. I walked down to the Seine. The river was gray and churned by the wind, but the air was crisp. I took a deep breath. For the first time in 34 years, I was entirely alone. And for the first time, being alone didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like safety. The silence on my end was absolute. But across the ocean, the storm was about to break. The following account is a reconstruction. It is pieced together from the high-definition body camera footage provided to me by the Titanium Holdings security team. The official police report filed under incident number 49221. And the frantic voicemails that began populating my cloud storage shortly after 9 in the morning. I was not there physically, but I have watched the footage so many times that I can smell the fear in the room. It was Tuesday morning, exactly 5 minutes past 9. Inside the house, the Aldridge family was indulging in a late, celebratory breakfast that looked more like a feast. They had raided my freezer. Caleb was hunched over a plate of steak and eggs, my Wagyu steaks, specifically while Brittany was feeding the twins pancakes at the island. My father, Frank, was reading the local newspaper at the head of my dining table, and my mother, Eleanor, was pouring coffee into one of my delicate china mugs. They looked settled. They looked permanent. They had the relaxed, heavy posture of people who believed they had gotten away with the heist of the century. They had not checked their email, or if they had dismissed my warning as a bluff. They were drunk on the illusion of ownership. At 9:05, the silence of the morning was shattered. It was not a polite knock. It was a rhythmic, authoritative pounding on the front door that shook the frame. It was the sound of a gavel coming down. On the video feed, I saw heads snap up. Caleb froze with a fork halfway to his mouth. Brittany dropped a spatula. The air in the room instantly shifted from comfort to confusion. "Who is that?" my mother asked, her voice shrill. "Probably a delivery," Caleb said, puffing out his chest. He stood up, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "I ordered a new gaming chair. I'll handle it." He walked to the door with the swagger of a man who pays the mortgage. He didn't look through the peephole. He unlocked the deadbolt, or thought he did, and swung the door open. Standing on the porch were 3 men. In the center was Sterling, the representative I had met in the glass tower. He was wearing a charcoal suit that cost more than Caleb's car. Flanking him were 2 large men in black tactical uniforms, with titanium asset protection embroidered on their chests. Behind them, parked in the driveway, were 2 black SUVs and a marked police cruiser. Caleb blinked. The swagger evaporated, replaced by a dull, bovine confusion. "Can I help you?" Caleb asked, trying to sound authoritative, but failing. "We aren't interested in whatever you are selling." Sterling didn't smile. He didn't introduce himself. He simply held up a clipboard. "Are you Caleb Aldridge?" Sterling asked. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. It was the voice of a machine. "Yeah, that's me," Caleb said, stepping partially out onto the porch to block the doorway. "Who are you?" "You're blocking my driveway." "My name is Sterling. I represent Titanium Holdings. We are the legal owners of this property as of 9 o'clock this morning. You are currently trespassing on corporate land. I am here to facilitate the immediate securing of the asset." Caleb laughed. It was a nervous, dry sound. "What? You got the wrong house. Buddy, my sister owns this place, Harmony Aldridge. She's in Paris. I'm house-sitting." "Ms. Aldridge no longer holds title to this property," Sterling said, pulling a document from the clipboard. "The sale was finalized and recorded with the county clerk 20 minutes ago. This is the deed. This is the transfer of ownership. You have no lease, no rental agreement, and no authorization to be on these premises." My father appeared behind Caleb. His face flushed red. "What is going on here? Who are these people?" "Caleb. Some scammers. Dad," Caleb spat, trying to slam the door. "Get off my property before I call the cops." He tried to shut the door, but one of the security guards put a heavy boot in the frame. The door shuddered and stopped. "The police are already here." "Sir," Sterling said calmly, gesturing to the cruiser behind him, but they are here to escort you off the premises, not us." "This is bullshit," my father roared, pushing past Caleb. "My daughter owns this house. She left us the keys. She gave us permission. You can't just walk up here and claim you own it." "Show them the keys." "Caleb," my mother shouted from the hallway, clutching her robe. "Show them the keys Harmony gave you." Caleb scrambled into his pocket and pulled out the brass keys I had given them at the airport. He held them up like a holy relic. "See?" Caleb yelled, shaking the keys in Sterling's face. "I have the keys. She gave them to me 2 days ago. That proves I live here." Sterling looked at the keys with a look of mild boredom. He turned to the security guard on his right. "Override." The guard stepped forward. He held a small, black electronic device against the smart lock panel on the door. He tapped a sequence on the screen. The lock beeped a long, descending tone that signaled a system reset. The internal tumblers whirred loudly. "Try your key now," Sterling said. Caleb jammed the brass key into the cylinder. He twisted it. Nothing happened. The cylinder spun freely, disconnected from the latch. The door remained firmly in the control of the electronic system, which had just been updated with a new encryption code. "That key is for a mechanical override that has been disabled," Sterling explained, as if teaching a child. "The digital access code you were using expired at 9 o'clock. You are locked out. The only reason the door is open right now is because we are holding it open." Caleb's face went pale. He tried the key again, twisting it frantically, but it was useless metal. "Call her," my mother screamed, running to the door. She looked wild, her hair unkempt, terror widening her eyes. "Caleb, call your sister right now. Tell her these maniacs are trying to steal her house." Caleb pulled out his phone. His hands were shaking so badly he almost dropped it. He jabbed at the screen. I could see it on the video. He was dialing my old number. He put the phone to his ear. "It goes straight to voicemail." Caleb stammered. "She's not picking up." "Try again," my father commanded. Caleb tried again and again. "It says the number is disconnected," Caleb whispered, the blood draining from his face. "She changed her SIM card," Sterling said. "Ms. Aldridge informed us she would be unreachable. She also informed us that the property was to be vacant upon transfer. The fact that you are here is a violation of the closing agreement." My mother burst into tears. It was a loud, wailing sound that echoed through the neighborhood. "She wouldn't do this. She is my daughter. She wouldn't sell the family home without telling us. You are lying. This is a fraud." Sterling sighed. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a tablet. He tapped the screen and turned it around so my parents could see. "This is the digital closing document," Sterling said. "Here is the date, here is the sale price, and here is Harmony Aldridge's verified digital signature, time-stamped 3 days ago." My father squinted at the screen. He saw my signature. He saw the Titanium Holdings logo. He saw the reality of the situation staring him in the face. $474,000, my father read, his voice trembling with a mix of shock and greed. "She sold it. She actually sold it." "Yes," Sterling said, taking the tablet back. "And now, we need to discuss your exit." "We can't leave," Brittany shrieked from the back of the hallway. She was holding the twins, who were starting to cry. "We just moved in. All our stuff is here. We have nowhere to go. You can't throw a family with children on the street." "We are not throwing you on the street," Sterling said. "We are removing you from a corporate asset. However, Titanium Holdings is not unreasonable. We are prepared to offer you a grace period." He looked at his watch. "You have 24 hours, Sterling announced. "You have until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning to remove all personal belongings and vacate the premises, if you are not gone by that time. We will authorize the police to arrest you for criminal trespassing, and we will have a junk removal crew dispose of any remaining items." 24 hours, Caleb shouted. "We have a trailer full of furniture. We can't move in a day." "That is not our concern," Sterling said. "The house was sold as vacant. Every minute you stay here. You are delaying our renovation team. 24 hours is a courtesy. Do not test us." At that moment, The police officer, who had been leaning against the cruiser, walked up the path. He was a large man with a weary expression. He adjusted his belt and looked at my father. "Is there a problem here, folks?" the officer asked. "Officer," my mother cried, grabbing his arm. "Arrest these men. They are breaking into my daughter's house." "Ma'am," the officer said, gently removing her hand. "I've seen the paperwork. Everything is in order. The company owns the building. They have asked me to file an incident report regarding the unauthorized occupants. I need to see identification from all adults present. We are victims here," my father sputtered. "My daughter tricked us." "That's a civil matter between you and your daughter," the officer said, pulling out his notebook. "Right now, I need to know who is in this house. IDs, now." The humiliation was absolute. My family, who had spent the last 48 hours acting like landed gentry, were now being lined up on the porch like common criminals, fumbling for their driver's licenses, while the neighbors watched from behind their curtains. I watched Caleb hand over his ID. He looked defeated. He looked small. The arrogance that had fueled him for 36 years had been punctured by the sharp reality of property law. "What about the kids?" Brittany sobbed. "Where are they supposed to sleep tonight?" "You have the house for tonight," Sterling said, turning to walk back to his SUV. "I suggest you spend the time packing instead of arguing. Security will remain parked at the end of the driveway to ensure no damage is done to the property. Good day." Sterling signaled to the security team. One guard remained at the foot of the driveway, crossing his arms. The other got back into the SUV. My family was left standing on the porch. The door was open, but it no longer felt like an entrance. It felt like a gaping mouth that was about to spit them out. My father turned to Caleb. His face was a mask of purple rage. "You said she gave you the house," my father hissed. "You said it was taken care of." "She did," Caleb stammered, backing away. "She gave me the keys. How was I supposed to know she sold it?" "You fool," my father shouted, shoving Caleb hard in the chest. "You stupid fool. You let her play us. She set us up." "Frank, stop," my mother wailed, pulling at his arm. "Not in front of the neighbors." They retreated inside and slammed the door. But the camera feed didn't cut off immediately. I had one last glimpse before the titanium IT team wiped the server. I saw them in the hallway. The live, laugh, love sign. Brittany had hung up, had fallen off the wall during the door slam. It lay on the floor, cracked down the middle. Caleb was sitting on the stairs, his head in his hands. Brittany was screaming at him. My father was pacing, kicking a box of books. My mother was sitting on the floor, holding the disconnected landline phone, staring at it as if she could will it to ring. They were trapped. They had 24 hours to undo the entire life they had just tried to steal. They had no home to go back to. They had already surrendered the keys to their old apartment. They had no money unless Caleb found the Western Union transfer I left him, and they had no one to blame but themselves. I watched for 10 more seconds. Then, the screen went black. Connection lost. I sat in the silence of my Paris apartment. The coffee in my cup had gone cold. My hands were trembling slightly. Not from fear, but from the adrenaline crash. It was done. The Band-Aid had been ripped off, taking a significant amount of skin with it. They were in shock now, but soon, the shock would turn to anger, and that anger would need a target. I picked up my phone and removed the SIM card, snapping the tiny piece of plastic in half. I dropped it into the wastebasket. I had 88 missed calls on my old number. I would never hear a single one of them. I stood up and walked to the window. The rain had stopped. The sun was trying to break through the gray clouds over the Seine. "You have 24 hours, I whispered to the glass. I put on my coat and walked out the door. I had a meeting with the Vanguard team in an hour. I had a brand to launch. I had a life to live. And for the first time in forever, I didn't have to carry 4 adults on my back while I did it. I sat at the small bistro table in my rental apartment, a glass of water sweating onto the coaster beside me. In my hand, I held my old phone. The SIM card was gone, snapped in half, and discarded in the trash hours ago. But the device itself was still a portal. I connected it to the apartment's Wi-Fi network and watched as the ghost of my former life downloaded itself into the palm of my hand. Modern technology is terrifyingly efficient. Even without the cellular chip, the carrier's app synced my call logs, text messages, and voicemails from the cloud the moment the internet connection was established. The phone vibrated, then it vibrated again and again. It buzzed against the wooden table like a dying insect, a continuous, angry spasm of notifications. When the screen finally settled, the number stared up at me in a bright red bubble. 88 missed calls, 124 text messages, 14 voicemails. I did not feel fear. I felt the cold, clinical detachment of a pathologist conducting an autopsy. I wanted to see the cause of death. I wanted to hear the exact moment the entitlement died and the panic set in. I put in my earbuds. I took a breath. I pressed play. The chronology of the breakdown was fascinating. It followed the stages of grief with almost textbook precision, but instead of grief, it was a descent into toxic madness. Phase 1. The shock. 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock. The first wave of messages arrived right when Sterling and the titanium security team would have stepped onto the porch. These were not angry yet. They were confused. They were the sounds of people who believed reality had made a mistake. Caleb. Text, 9:08 a.m. Pick up the phone. Some guys are here saying they own the house. It's a prank, right? Tell me you hired actors for a reveal or something. Mom. Voicemail, 9:12 a.m. Harmony, pick up. There are men with guns on the porch. They are wearing uniforms. They say they are from a titanium company I don't understand. Did you forget to pay a bill? Call me back immediately. We are frightened, Dad. Text, 9:15 a.m. Stop playing games. This isn't funny. Tell these people to leave. They are blocking the driveway and the neighbors are watching. I listened to my mother's voice again. She sounded genuinely baffled. In her mind, the idea that I would sell the house was so impossible, so contrary to the laws of the universe she had invented, that she assumed it was a billing error or a practical joke. She could not conceive of a world where I disobeyed her. Phase 2, the rage. 10 o'clock to 1 in the afternoon. This was when the titanium representative, Sterling, must have shown them the digital deed. This was when the locksmith disabled the door. The confusion evaporated, replaced by a scorching, volcanic fury. The messages from this period were difficult to read. They were raw, hateful, and designed to inflict maximum damage. Dad. Voicemail, 10:42 a.m. You ungrateful, deceitful little bitch. I am looking at a document that says you sold this house 3 days ago. 3 days. You looked me in the eye in the driveway and lied to me. After everything we did for you, we raised you, we fed you, and you sell our home out from under us like a thief in the night. You are rot. Harmony. You are rotten to the core. Brittany. Text, 11:15 a.m. You are a psycho. Seriously, who does this? I have crying kids here. You ruined everything. I hope you die alone in Paris, because nobody is ever going to love a selfish monster like you. Mom. Voicemail, 11:30 a.m. She is sobbing, but it sounds angry, not sad. How could you? That house was the family legacy. It was where the boys were going to grow up. You stole their childhood. Frank is having chest pains because of you. If he has a heart attack, it is murder. Harmony. It is murder on your hands. You better fix this. You better call them and cancel the sale right now, or God will punish you. I paused the audio. My hand was shaking slightly. Our home, family legacy. The delusion was absolute. They truly believed that my name on the deed was just a technicality, and that their desire to live there constituted legal ownership. My father's slur calling me a bitch stung, but it also cauterized the wound. A father who loves his daughter does not speak to her that way. No matter how angry he is, A parasite, however, screams when it is ripped from the host. Phase 3. The threats. 1 o'clock to 4 in the afternoon. By early afternoon, they must have realized that screaming wasn't working. Sterling wasn't budging. The police were involved. So they switched tactics. They tried to use fear. Dad. Text. 1:45 p.m. I'm calling a lawyer. You can't evict tenants without 30 days' notice. We have rights. We have possession. I will sue you for every penny you made on this sale. I will drag your name through the mud. Caleb. Text. 2:10 p.m. Dad is really mad. Harm. He's talking about going to the press. He says he's going to tell everyone you abandoned your family. You need to wire us money. Big money. If you send us $50,000 right now, maybe I can calm him down. Otherwise, I can't stop him. I let out a dry, humorless laugh. Extortion. It always came back to extortion. Caleb trying to play the good cop while demanding $50,000 was so transparent it was pathetic. They were grasping at straws, trying to find leverage where none existed. They didn't know that I had sold to a corporate entity that ate frivolous lawsuits for breakfast. Phase 4, the pleading. 5 o'clock to present. The sun had gone down in Texas. The 24-hour clock was ticking. The adrenaline had worn off, and the cold reality of homelessness was setting in. The rage collapsed into desperate, pathetic begging. Caleb voicemail. 6:20 p.m. His voice is cracking. He sounds drunk. Harmony, please. Pick up. We don't have anywhere to go. The landlord already rented out our old apartment. We're sitting on boxes in the living room and the security guard is watching us through the window. It's scary. Harm. The boys are asking why we can't unpack. Please, just call the guy. Tell him to let us stay. Just for a month. Just until I get paid. I'll pay rent. I swear. Please, sis, don't do this to me. Mom. Text. 7 o'clock p.m. We are family. Family forgives. We forgive you for the mistake. Just fix it. We love you. Please don't let strangers take the house. Brittany. Text. 7:45 p.m. Where are we supposed to sleep tomorrow? The shelters are full. Do you want your nephews in a shelter? I took the earbuds out. The silence of my Paris apartment rushed back in, heavy and sweet. They were begging for a reprieve from a sentence they had imposed on themselves. If they had just watered the plants, if they had just been the supportive family they pretended to be, they would still have their old apartment, and I would still be their safety net. But they got greedy. They wanted the whole pie, and now they were choking on the crust. I did not feel guilty about the shelter threat. I knew for a fact that my parents had a perfectly functional 2-bedroom house 20 minutes away. They weren't going to be homeless. They were just going to be cramped. They would have to squeeze Caleb, Brittany, and the twins into their small retirement bungalow. They would have to live on top of each other. In the mess they created, that was not a tragedy. It was a consequence. I opened my email client. I did not want to call them. I did not want to hear their voices in real time. I wanted everything in writing. I wanted a record. I composed a single email. I added Frank, Eleanor, Caleb, and Brittany to the recipient list. Subject: The truth and the final offer. To the Aldridge family, I received your messages. I have listened to your threats, your insults, and your pleas. Now, you are going to listen to me. Do not lie to yourselves about why this is happening. This is not a sudden decision. This is not me abandoning you. This is a direct response to your actions. I know you copied my key. I have the security footage of Caleb and the locksmith from 2 weeks ago. I know about the measuring tape. I saw Mom measuring my windows for new drapes before I had even left. I know about the live stream room. I was in the hallway that Tuesday night. I heard everything. I heard Brittany planning to gut my office. I heard Mom saying I would be too afraid of conflict to kick you out when I returned. And I heard Dad say that I owed you my house because you raised me. I do not owe you my life. I do not owe you my labor. And I certainly do not owe you a $499,000 asset to exploit because you refused to work for your own. You planned to steal my home. You planned to squat until I gave up. You banked on my weakness. You bet against me. And you lost. The house belongs to Titanium Holdings. That is final. There is no undoing it. If you are not out by 9 tomorrow morning, they will have you arrested. I cannot stop them. And frankly, I would not stop them if I could. However, because I am not the monster you painted me to be in your text messages, I am offering one final lifeline, not because you deserve it, but because Noah and Liam do. 1. I have transferred $5,000 to the Western Union on 5th Street. The transfer is in Caleb's name. The control number is attached below. This is enough for a deposit and first month's rent on a modest apartment. 2. Below is a list of 3 apartment complexes in North Austin that currently have vacancies within that price range. They are not luxury, they do not have hardwood floors or granite countertops, but they are clean and they are available. Complex A. The Oaks at Lamar. 2 bedrooms available immediately. Complex B. Riverside Commons. 3 bedrooms available. Complex C. North Cross Suites. This money is the last cent you will ever receive from me. Do not ask for more. Do not try to sue me. My lawyer has all the evidence of your conspiracy to commit fraud and theft, and he is ready to file a countersuit that will bankrupt you. Take the money, rent an apartment, get a job. Be parents to your children instead of parasites on your relatives. I am blocking your numbers after this email sends. Do not try to find me. Goodbye. Harmony. I read the email twice. It was harsh. It was brutal, but it was the truth. It was the surgery required to remove the cancer. I attached the Western Union receipt. I attached the links to the apartment listings, places I knew Brittany would turn her nose up at. Places that were a far cry from my mid-century modern sanctuary. But places that were real and affordable. I pressed send. The swoosh sound of the email departing was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. I put the phone down. I stared at the blank screen. The 88 missed calls didn't matter anymore. The screaming voicemails didn't matter. They were just noise, static from a channel I had finally turned off. I stood up and walked to the small kitchenette of my rental. I poured the rest of the water down the sink. I felt light, physically light. The invisible backpack of guilt I'd been carrying for 20 years had been set down. My family was currently in a house in Texas. Reading that email, I could imagine the screaming. I could imagine the blame shifting. Caleb would blame Dad for making him angry. Mom would blame Brittany for wanting the studio. Brittany would blame me. Let them eat each other. I looked at the clock. It was time for dinner in Paris. I had a reservation at a small place around the corner that served excellent onion soup. I grabbed my coat and my scarf. I left the phone on the table. I didn't need it. The only people I needed to talk to were in front of me, in my future, not behind me in the wreckage of the past. You might think that my email, accompanied by a $5,000 peace offering, would have been the end of it. You might think that faced with the undeniable reality of a sold house and a corporate eviction team. My family would have taken the money, licked their wounds, and retreated to the affordable apartments I had listed for them. But you would be underestimating the sheer, blinding audacity of the Aldridge entitlement. Desperation is a powerful fuel, but when mixed with narcissism, it becomes explosive. Instead of packing their bags with humility, my parents decided to burn the bridge I had already crossed. They didn't just get angry, they got litigious. 3 days after the eviction, a chaotic event where the Titanium security team physically escorted Caleb and a screaming Brittany off the property. While the neighbors filmed on their iPhones, I received a notification from my lawyer. Marcus. You need to sit down, Marcus said when I answered the phone in my Paris rental. What did they do? I asked, looking out at the rain slicking the cobblestones. Did they break a window? Worse, Marcus replied, his voice dry. They filed a civil suit, and they are petitioning for a freeze on your assets. I laughed. It was a reflex. On what grounds I owned the house? I sold the house. The title was clean. They aren't suing for the title, Marcus explained. They are suing for unjust enrichment and breach of verbal contract. Their lawyer, some strip mall ambulance chaser working on contingency, is arguing that your success and your ability to purchase that home were directly derived from their emotional contribution and parental sacrifice. They are claiming that the house was, in spirit, a family trust, and by selling it without their consent, you have defrauded them of their rightful share. I sat in silence. The audacity was so thick I could almost taste it. They were suing me for being successful. They were legally arguing that because they raised me, they owned a percentage of my adult life. And that's not all, Marcus continued. They have gone to the court of public opinion. Have you looked at Facebook today? I hadn't. I opened the app. My feed was a war zone. My mother had posted a 2,000-word manifesto, accompanied by a photo of her crying on the curb next to a pile of garbage bags. The caption was a masterpiece of fiction. She claimed I had tricked them into giving up their apartment, promised them my home, and then sold it behind their backs to a heartless corporation, leaving her grandchildren homeless in the street. The comments were brutal. Strangers were calling me a monster. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in 10 years were posting snake emojis. Brittany had shared the post with the caption, "This is what happens when money turns people evil." My poor babies are sleeping in a basement because their aunt cares more about Chanel bags than family. For a moment, I felt a spike of panic. This was my reputation. This could bleed into my professional life. "Do you want to settle?" Marcus asked. "Throw them another 20,000 just to make it go away?" I looked at the photo of my mother crying, the same woman I had watched measuring my windows for new drapes while I was still living there. I thought about the live, laugh, love sign. I thought about the wine Caleb drank out of a dog cup. "No," I said. "No settlements, no mercy. We are going to nuke them." "I was hoping you would say that," Marcus said. "What do you have?" "I have everything," I replied. I sent Marcus the file. It was a digital dossier I had been compiling for years. But the crown jewels were the recordings from the last month. We didn't just file a motion to dismiss. We filed a countersuit for defamation and fraud, and we attached the evidence as public exhibits. Exhibit A, the security footage of Caleb and the locksmith breaking into my home to create an unauthorized key. Exhibit B, the audio recording of the conversation in the hallway, where my father explicitly stated, "The girl is rich, she owes us this," and Brittany detailed her plan to gut my office for her live stream studio. Exhibit C, a 10-year compilation of bank statements, every Western Union transfer, every loan for rent, every bail bond payment, every car repair bill. The total came to $87,422. We didn't just release this to the court. We released a redacted version to the same social media channels they were using to smear me. The reaction was instantaneous. The internet, which loves a villain, loves a receipt even more. When people heard the audio of my mother laughing about how I was too afraid of conflict to kick them out, the sympathy for the homeless grandparents evaporated. When they saw the video of Caleb handing cash to a locksmith to break into a house he didn't own, the narrative shifted from victim to criminal. The comment section on my mother's post turned into a bloodbath. People started tagging the IRS. People started tagging the police. 2 days later, their lawyer withdrew from the case. He realized there was no money to be won. Only a countersuit that would destroy his reputation. The lawsuit was dropped. But the legal victory was secondary to the personal victory, because they had refused to take the apartment options I sent, and because they had burned through the $5,000 on legal fees and a hotel stay they couldn't afford. They were forced into the only option left. Caleb, Brittany, and the twins moved into my parents' basement. I learned the details later through a distant aunt who was still on speaking terms with me. The picture she painted was grim, and for the first time, I felt a sense of poetic justice that was far satisfying than any court judgment. My parents' house is a small, 2-bedroom bungalow built in the 70s. It has 1 bathroom. It was never designed to hold 6 people. My mother, who had spent her life enabling Caleb's helplessness, was now living in the epicenter of it. There was no escape. She had to listen to the twins screaming at 6 in the morning. She had to deal with Brittany refusing to clean up the kitchen because she was too depressed. She had to watch Caleb sit on her couch, drinking her beer, complaining about how the world was unfair, while contributing absolutely nothing to the household. The golden child had returned to the nest, but he had brought his baggage, and the nest was cracking under the weight. My aunt told me that the fights were legendary. Brittany and my mother were at each other's throats daily. My father, who cherished his quiet evenings with the newspaper, was now hiding in the garage to escape the noise. They were finally experiencing the reality of the son they had raised. They couldn't blame me anymore. I was thousands of miles away. The problem was sitting at their breakfast table, eating their food, and demanding to be served. I realized then that my refusal to let them steal my house was not just an act of self-preservation. It was the lifting of a curtain. For 30 years, I had been the buffer. I had been the ATM that solved the problems, so my parents never had to face the consequences of Caleb's failures. By removing myself, I had forced them to confront the monster they had created, and that, truly, was the ultimate punishment. 1 year later, Paris had changed me, or perhaps it had simply allowed me to become who I was always meant to be. I was no longer the hunched, anxious woman trying to buy affection with bank transfers. I stood taller. I spoke French with a decent accent. I drank my coffee slowly. I had bought a small apartment in the 11th arrondissement. It was a fraction of the size of my Texas home. It didn't have a grand foyer or a 2-car garage. It had creaky floors, a tiny elevator that smelled like old paper, and a balcony that was just big enough for 1 chair. But it was mine, and the key in my pocket was the only key in existence. I was sitting on that balcony, watching the sunset bleed orange and purple into the Seine. When my phone buzzed, I rarely checked my old American messaging apps, but today I felt a pull. I opened WhatsApp. There was a message from a new number. The profile picture was a grainy selfie of Caleb, looking tired, wearing a neon yellow vest. "Hey Harm, it's Caleb. Mom gave me your number. Don't worry, I'm not asking for money." I stared at the screen. I didn't reply immediately. I just wanted to say I got a job. I'm driving a delivery truck for a logistics company. It's hard work. My back kills me. But I'm paying for my own place now. A small studio for me and the boys. Brittany and I split up. She stayed in the basement with Mom. It was a nightmare. I took a sip of wine. Brittany and Mom in the basement together. That sounded like a circle of hell Dante forgot to write about. I know I messed up. The next message read, "I know we were wrong. Dad still rants about you. But man, living with them, I get it now. I get why you left. I just wanted you to know that I'm trying. I'm actually paying my own electric bill this month. It feels different." I looked at the words. It feels different. He was 37 years old, and he was finally feeling the pride of paying an electric bill. It was a small, almost pathetic victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. My cruelty had done what my parents' kindness never could. It had forced him to become a man. I didn't want to open the door to a conversation. I didn't want to invite him back into my life. The boundaries I had built were made of iron, and they were there to stay. But I typed a short response. "I'm glad to hear that. Caleb, keep going. Do it for the boys." I hit send. Then I archived the chat. I didn't block him, but I didn't save the number. I put the phone down on the small metal table. I stood up and leaned over the railing. The air was cool and smelled of rain and roasted chestnuts. Below me, the city of lights was waking up. People were walking hand in hand along the river. Horns were honking. Life was moving forward, chaotic and beautiful. I thought about my big empty house in Austin. Titanium Holdings had renovated it, stripped out the teak paneling, and turned it into a sterile corporate rental. It didn't matter. It was just wood and stone. I had lost 4,000 square feet of property. I had lost the approval of my parents. I had lost the illusion of a happy family. But as I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the Parisian air, I realized what I had gained. I had gained my dignity. I had gained my financial future. I had gained the peace of mind that comes from knowing that the only person responsible for my happiness is me. I raised my glass to the horizon. To the villain, I whispered, smiling, and to the hero. Because sometimes, to save yourself, you have to be willing to be the bad guy in someone else's story, and that is a role I was finally happy to play. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It was a journey of boundaries, betrayal, and finally, freedom. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from a busy subway in New York, a quiet room in London, or maybe somewhere sunny like Brazil? Please drop a comment below and share your location and your thoughts on Harmony's decision. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the BitterSweet Drama Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button so we can share these stories with more people around the world. Your support means everything. Until next time, protect your peace.